Are you ready to learn what red flags keep an eye out for when looking for love?
Then we got you covered. I'm Brianna.
And I'm Alex.
And this is the podcast where we unpack reality TV and call out the bullshit.
So that you show up confidently while dating and in relationships.
Welcome to
Ditch the Script.
I love it. Hello.
Oh my God. This is going to be gold, this episode, I feel like. Holy crap, so much happened, so much is going on, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts.
I've been so excited to talk about this today. Last night's episode was really interesting and not in like the typical like razzmatazz, here's some built up drama, like some genuinely interesting social dynamics.
Oh my God. Yes.
I have a lot of thoughts.
Very. Me too. Yeah. I, again, still super proud of the way Michelle is handling it all, carrying herself, doing all of the things. But last night's episode, I feel really painted the picture of why it is so freaking important for women to watch people's behaviors over a period of time. Consistency is key. And, last night we had a lot of interesting green flags, red flags, back and forth, people being manipulative and not forthcoming. So are you ready? Are you ready to
let me
take it?
Let me take a sip of this coffee.
Yeah, prepare yourself.
If you hear some rattling around, it's a Starbucks that was prescribed to me by myself because I needed it.
Starbucks, iced coffee, and Alex has sparkling green tea pineapple beverage.
That sounds delightful. Are you kidding?
It really is. No, it's Trader Joe's, man. They're the best.
Yeah, they crush it every time. Okay, I'm curious.
Okay,
what were your green flags?
Well, my green flags, okay, so honestly, I had a lot of green flags for Jamie on his freaking one-on-one until it became very clear that those green flags were very calculated green flag moves.
Yeah. And
that was very illuminating, and I think this is a perfect example to unpack for women on how, it is our responsibility. It's, whoever is listening to this, no matter what you got between your legs or how you identify, the reality is that it is your responsibility to pay attention and to make sure that you're being honest with yourself before you're getting ahead of yourself emotionally, right? Because on their one-on-one date, Jamie was articulate about his past with being able to manage his emotions and very forthcoming with what, the contrast of Michelle's life and seeing her healthy relationship from her parents and what his upbringing was. And I was like, okay, this show's healing to me. This show's growth, because if someone is still very much wounded from their past, it's going to be a lot of emotions, maybe a little bit of manic behavior. And he didn't show that until later, right?
Yeah.
When he got
himself into some trouble. As far as how his one-on-one date goes, Jamie talks, like you just said, Jamie talked a lot about his upbringing, and he unfortunately lost his mother to suicide, and it clearly, like as it would anyone, really affected him, and he carried that with such like emotional responsibility, and it like allowed him to be vulnerable in that space. Michelle was obviously really touched. He even shed light on how he appreciated how she responded, because she didn't just jump to this, I'm so sorry that happened to you, because for him, as he explained, this is part of what makes me who I am, which shows a lot of strength. I loved getting to know that part of him, and it struck a value that I have outside of the show, just in like my waking life, which is the more that you get to know people intimately, the more that we are able to appreciate them as human beings. That doesn't necessarily mean that it leads towards romantic connection all the time, but it does allow you to like see them in a state that is allows them to be far more human. And I love that about socializing. I love that about our ability to get to know each other. I'm glad I learned that, because if I saw his behavior that followed, I would have been far more judgmental about him. So
yeah,
that was tough. That was tough. Maybe we need to give some context about the Jamie situation, which we obviously started talking about last week.
Yeah.
We know that Michelle and Joe.
Joe.
We know that Michelle and Joe know each other.
I knew what you meant.
You knew what I meant. It's a lot of J names. It's tough up here. So she knew Joe from Minneapolis, and she was honest about that. At least she was honest with the producers. So we as an audience knew that. I don't know how many people in the in the house actually knew. But so Jamie and this other guy start getting really concerned about the relevance of Joe. Does she know Joe? Did she date Joe? Jamie had caught wind of this rumor that Michelle was connected with someone that fit the description of Joe. And so he clearly felt feelings about that. And then he pulled her for a chat, and he immediately, from my perspective, said, "Oh, other people are feeling that way. Other people are..."
Red flag.
He did not own the fact that this was something that he was mulling over and something that was bothering him.
Yes. Yeah. And so I'm so glad you and I are picking this up in the same way, because this is the reality, folks, is that when there is a lack of confidence with yourself, there's a lack of self-trust, whether that's from past trauma, whether that's from, whatever, life, or lack of maturity, whatever. We go into conversations trying to remain blameless, right? And so we assign the blame to other people, because then we feel more confident pointing the finger elsewhere, saying, like, in Jamie's response, I'm very much paraphrasing here, but he basically was saying, look, it's not an issue with me, but there's other people in the house that have a problem with this seemingly previous connection that you and Joe have. We don't feel like we're starting out on the same playing field. At no point was he like, I'm the one that is a little concerned. I've noticed this. This is also what I heard. And it's just making me feel a little uncomfortable. And I'd love to gain insight from your perspective on what happened before we got
Which
here.
I think
that would have been the healthy way to handle it.
That would have been totally acceptable.
Sexy. That would have been sexy AF if he was like, oh, shoot, we had a one-on-one. I felt like we really connected. And now I'm getting in my head because I see this connection you have with Joe. And I feel like there's some familiarity there. And I also heard from a friend of mine that you might have been seen with him. Like, healthy communication like that, I don't know about you, but it gets me going. It's like, oh, okay, all right, you're an emotionally mature man. Like, you're willing to show up and be honest with me.
And she could have addressed it. She could have addressed it right then and right there.
And instead, the poor guy, I'm a little frustrated with Jamie, if I'm being completely honest, but because of the way he brought this up to her and was trying to look like the innocent in this whole situation, poor Michelle really is what happened. Is she's now freaking out because she's like, oh my God, there's this rumor going around. No one's coming to me about it. It's just turning into gossip. And now she's all, I don't know who to trust.
Right. So she,
and I don't know who trusts me.
It put her in a really difficult position because she got this, she's just working off of what was shared with her, which is
one person.
And everyone in the house feels some type of way. She has no idea how much of the house makes up this collective concern. But so she thinks the best way for her to handle it is to gather everyone and make note of it. And in that, she had to be quite kind of painfully honest about her history with Joe, which she really didn't need to get into with anyone but Joe, which she'd already dealt with. She'd already done
managed that. Yeah.
Right. And so she has to address everyone, and which was so uncomfortable for her. And you could tell that was the last thing that she wanted to do, but it felt like the smartest thing that she could do with the information that she thought that she had. So no one says anything because the one other person, which I don't even know that dude's name, just bleached bleached head guy. Bleached head guy.
Oh yeah, that guy.
He's concerned, but he says nothing. She's like opening it up and he says nothing.
Nope.
Jamie obviously says nothing.
So is Rodney. Which, oh, by the way, Rodney came up in like a confessional thing with his producers, and Jordan and I were like, who are you? We still have not met. We've only met the villains. They've done such a good job of front loading us with that.
I'll be honest, as you're saying this,
mm-hmm.
Who's Rodney? Who's Rodney?
He had a navy suit on. He kind of has a smaller head. I don't know how else to describe him. I don't even know what his job title is.
Yeah, he's been
he seems like a good dude. He was the one. Well, look, this was Jordan and I were screaming at the TV last night because here's what happened. She opens the floor in a very mature way. Again, Michelle handling it like a freaking badass babe. Okay. Mm-hmm. Vulnerable, explains what's going on, opens the floor. Does anyone have any questions? Do you have any feelings that you want to share and communicate? Silence. You can hear a pin drop. Mm-hmm. The second she walks away, Rodney's all, did I miss every conversation in the house? Like, he says that. He literally says that. And I'm like, bro, that's what you should have said when she opened the floor, because immediately that would have shed light on who the real culprit of this information is, which bleached head guy, full well, even they know because Jamie was telling them.
Right. That, okay. Now I'm aware. Now I'm aware who that is. That's Granny Smith guy.
Okay.
That's Apple Dawning.
Oh, that's Apple Man. That's
Apple
right.
Man.
That is Apple Man. Rodney is Apple Man.
Yeah, I totally agree with you though.
I like our nicknames better.
Me too. So Apple Guy, I agree with you. If he were to have been like, actually, I'm really confused. I don't know what's going on. Can someone shed some light? That would have, maybe it would have made it more uncomfortable for Michelle, because she would have been like, what alternate universe am I living in now? But at least she would have been able to be confronted with the fact that this is not the
Jamie problem.
Yeah, exactly. This is not the descripted issue that she was fed. I was thinking a lot about last night about why he may have made the choice that he did, which you've really sort of shared with us already. It didn't feel so comfortable for him to own his feelings, so he put it on other people. And I think that we as a group have a tendency to do that far more often than we should, instead of owning our feelings, because owning 100%. Our feelings is brave and it is scary, but the payout is
vulnerable.
Yeah, it's vulnerable. The payout is worth it though. To put it on other people, you get a situation like this where it blows up. Mm-hmm. That blew all the way up.
It's not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not worth it, because like I said a minute ago, if Jamie had just confronted her, owned his feelings, requested the clarification he wanted, that would have been a 5-minute to 10-minute convo between the two of them that didn't lead to canceling the rest of the cocktail party, that would have bonded their emotional intimacy and matured their relationship. Mm-hmm. Because let's be real, Bri, you and I freaking know that mature, healthy, long-term relationships require uncomfortable conversations. Yeah. So the fact that he had one date with her on this second week and is already displaying this lack of confidence in doing that, to me, that's like something to watch. I would probably distance myself from him if I was dating someone. Definitely. Like that, right? That's uncomfortable for me. Also, she doesn't know what we know, so there's some dramatic irony going on, but hopefully that'll come to the light soon.
The other red flag in this behavior of Jamie's following that was, obviously now Michelle's left, the men are trying to work out A plus B equals MXB,
MC squared,
and they're losing the plot. And Jamie is just making expressions with his forehead, which I
like surprised.
But I also feel like he is like giving it away, that like, because he also looks like he's offended by the way that people are talking about the behavior. It is really interesting to, while we've decided that like the behavior came from just like a step to the right of the honest thing to do, it's not this like villainous action, but the way that people are able to talk about it when they actually don't know who it's coming from and have no idea why, it becomes this, what a scumbag, when really like it's a red flag and it's a sign of insecurity and some emotional challenges, but it is not the villainous trap that it got sort of blown up to be. But this is what happens when you don't own your shit. Like people
100%.
started talking, and then the thing that I found funniest, was probably so uncomfortable, is that Jamie is this like trusted guy in this group, and that's very clear. So he's in all of these little smaller bit conversations following the wake of that, and everyone's just like, yeah, you feel me, right, man? And he's just like, oh yeah,
oh my God. Yeah. And to me, that's like the concern.
That gave me the
like
ick. That gave me the ick.
Yeah, 100%. Because again, lack of honesty, lack of transparency, integrity, like it, because of the insecurity that's there and the lack of self-trust, I personally believe is what his wounds are that he needs to kind of confront a little bit more before he can get into a healthy long-term relationship. So I feel like we've kind of unpacked the Jamie thing. I do want to move over to Peter, who my first week, I didn't say this last week, Bri, I know I texted you a photo of my dinner, but because he's a pizzeria man, I don't know why I nicknamed him Meatball Sub. I'm giving you all this roundabout information. I don't know why. First week, Italian guy, makes Italian food. I was craving a meatball sub. That was what I nicknamed him.
And you also,
know? Okay,
important
sub,
to note, you made that meatball sub.
I did. I was craving it, that within 24 hours, I made that meatball sub. And it was damn
And honestly,
good.
it's the best thing that Peter has given us since.
100%, because walking red flag.
Yeah, Peter.
Walking red flag.
Peter's meatball guy is arrogant AF. And like, so the setting is he's on a group date. He's in a classroom. Michelle hits him with the teacher reference early. She takes him into a classroom where she clearly has like child actors who are like, she's putting these boys to shame because she's asking them to spell like really basic words and ask them to do like basic math, but challenging for me. And she's just making them feel like fully emasculated, especially regarding their intelligence. And Peter is just he's being a tryhard, and he's being boisterous and he's talking a lot. And like, I don't even see that she's noticing, but the other guys are like, oh, this guy, Peter, he's just a lot. And when a lot of people have energy like that, I am typically the person that's like, ooh, I have to back away. I'm going to shrink. Exactly. I want to shrink, and I want to be in a corner and be away, far, far away.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a second. This dynamic of like someone's energy takes up a lot of space, and someone feels the need to shrink themselves. So I talk a lot about masculine, feminine energies with my clients, and energy work, period, is very important in my opinion. Okay. And you just painted that as a great picture. There are dynamics where everything is always trying to reach homeostasis, right? Yeah. With the earth, we see it with natural disasters occurring. It's trying to fix itself, things like that, right? Same thing within this small example of a classroom. You have someone who's taking up a lot of space, which forces the other people to bring it down because it's trying to find a balance. They're trying to balance out his energy to maintain the homeostasis and status quo of the group, right?
That makes a lot of sense.
And that can be really offensive to some people. Like, who was it when she said, spell the word narcissist, and someone said
Peter.
Mm-hmm. Ooh.
Yeah,
so what are your thoughts on that?
That was a heavy dig. I don't know if it was so appropriate to do in the setting, but it was done. I did get a little chuckle out of it because Peter was doing the absolute most to the nth degree. Yep. I think what was really interesting about that is how the emotional reaction that Peter had in that, and then what it what it sort of became throughout the rest of the show.
Yeah.
Like it ended up taking on a life of its own because it became this very heated energy between Peter and this other guy. I'd love to know his name. Will. Thank you.
Will.
So Peter and Will get into it, and they are having at it to a degree that it's actually become pretty distracting. What did you think about it to start?
Oops, sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry, my phone alarm went off. Not sure if you heard it.
Did.
Anyone else have alarms set throughout their day to make sure that they stay on task? Because apparently Alex has
my mom has a couple. So, she has one that goes off at 3:00 that reminds her to be optimistic, which I know that. She really does it. I'll hear it and I'll scream from the other room and I'll go, "What are you optimistic about? What are you optimistic about, Mom?" And she's like, "Shut up."
That's cute though. So I agree with you. I feel like it was kind of uncalled for Will to make that move, but I also think that that's shedding light on Will's projection and insecurities and all of that. So, and I actually have a quote from Will that in my opinion sheds just as much light on his character as it does Peter. So in this example, it was really fascinating to watch because both of these guys, in my opinion, are two gentlemen that I would eliminate for a few reasons. So one, Peter's explosive anger over something. Let's be real, guys. The truth is that if you know your truth and you're comfortable and confident with yourself and you know you're not a narcissist, you would laugh at that, right? You would be like, okay, bro. And you would let it go. You wouldn't dig into that. And I think a lot of people need that reminder is like, you know your truth. If someone's trying to say something else, fighting fire with fire leads nowhere. Be the water in that situation. Be the water. Calm it down. And the way you do that is by not engaging. Okay? Because if you know that doesn't define you as a person, you know those aren't your qualities, you wouldn't engage that way. Right?
Yeah.
But he did. And he went 0 to 150 plus. Yeah. And Will fought right back at him. And I want to talk about their interaction during the cocktail ceremony, or party or whatever.
Like little group date moment. Yeah, I thought that it was crazy that they were fighting so loud that while she was having a one-on-one moment with one of the other guys that you could hear it. And it is amazing that she didn't she didn't get off track for a moment.
I agree.
I would have been like, hold up. I'm a little distracted, but she was working really hard to be focused in on this guy that deserved to have that time with her.
Agreed.
And she deserved to have the time with him to get to know him, but it's such a shame. And stuff like this always pops up. And I get that it could be about like beefing up the show and making it like more interesting because it's dramatic. But the thing is when you really like boil it down, it does take away time from contestants that need the opportunity to have small one-on-one moments so that they can build a connection with her or whoever the main person, the targeted partner is, because if without that, you really have nothing. So they get really loud. And I noted this in my notebook, which is that like bruised egos really always take away from the whole point of the show. It always escalates. It always becomes distracting. I loved, however, how Michelle addressed him.
Yeah. So before we get to how Michelle addressed him, because I agree with you, she trained him in that moment.
Literally.
I agree. We're going to get there. But I do want to talk about how with Will and Peter, they were yelling over one another. There was no one was listening.
Yes.
They were just screaming at each other. Literally, like, they were talking simultaneously at each other, not with each other. Right. And let's talk about yelling.
Yeah.
Okay? Let's talk
about yelling.
Because it's not okay. Yelling is not okay. It is very there's a lot of science that shows how damaging it is to the body and the brain, and how it erodes a relationship because the person being yelled at starts to just silence themselves out of the fear and discomfort that yelling brings. So there's a lack of respect that starts to happen when you're yelling at a partner, whether that's a friend, romantic, anyone, and even parental child relationships. Yelling is just something that, in my opinion, is unacceptable. And of course, we all have the tendency to raise our voice. And I'm going to, before I pass it to you, Bri, just want to say one more thing. We yell when we don't feel like we're being heard. And so we escalate our voice as if that is going to get the person to understand us, when really what needs to happen is a timeout. We need to freaking calm the hell down and then be able to find our words in a comfortable tone in order to make any progress, which neither of them had the emotional maturity to do for one another. Now we can talk about Michelle.
No, I actually, in response to that, I totally agree, because if we're choosing to enter any kind of conflict, and a lot of times we avoid conflict. So if we're actually making the choice to address it, it's because we want to say something and we want it to be heard. And when you are saying without listening, and also saying without being heard, which yelling is going to create, especially yelling on top of each other, you have accomplished nothing. You have only added pieces to the conflict puzzle. And if this is between you and your partner, I fear the later conclusions that you might have about one another and the ways that you communicate. Like you really have to take a step back. If you're still feeling angry, you have to check in with how that conversation went. Did I even hear what they were saying? Because I know that I didn't feel heard. What do we need to do differently to be able to get to a place where I don't feel on fire afterwards, and neither do you?
Yeah. And I think sometimes it's as simple as that. Hey, I'm not feeling heard right now. Let's take a time out so we can come back to this later and both feel like we're understanding the other person. Right. Whatever verbiage works for you, but call it out. I can promise you this. You will make more progress within your relationships if you can just say what you're thinking instead of trying to get your point across. Similar to how Jamie was, he wasn't being truthful with what he was thinking. So he found some other way to bring that up and point the finger at something. And same with Will and Peter. If Peter had been like, bro, that really hurt my feelings. That's not cool with me. I felt like it was a lack of respect. Can you be mindful of that moving forward? And Will was like, yeah, homie, sorry that I made you feel that way. I was just caught up in the moment and I did something that wasn't cool. If the roles were reversed, that would hurt my ego too. And, but my bad, bro hug, done. That could have been a way more successful way, but it wasn't that. It was, you did this and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Not helpful.
On some toxic ass shit. Really toxic.
For real.
True to Michelle's feelings about it, that was a red flag for her. So she approaches Peter. She just, at least we don't see it. We don't see her have a conversation with Will. But she approaches Peter and she is like, you were serving aggression. You were serving anger. It was giving a lot of drama. Like, what's that about? And, he goes into his very well thought out of, insight as to how he was hurt and how inappropriate it was. I love that he was like, and to say that in front of the kids, you don't give a fuck about those kids. You really don't. Like that was just carefully placed there to beef up your defense. Right. And she's like, okay, I hear that. I hear that upset you. I can't pretend to know what that would feel like in your shoes, but I'm going to piss you off at some point. Yep. So if I'm on the receiving end of that, that's going to be a problem.
Agreed. Yes, girl.
I thought that was so important.
And it really was. And I'm trying to look for the quote through my notes right now. I'm going to paraphrase, but I feel like she I might be quoting her. I thought I wrote this down, but I digress. She said to him, when you yell, no one hears you. And which is true. And so the fact that she can be that articulate and express, I don't know if you've read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence
Nope.
People, but it basically explains that. It's like when you're trying to, convince someone or influence someone to do something, you need to have them understand why it's in their best interest, right? It can't be all about you.
Right.
And so when she brought up to Peter, it's like, which guy are we talking about? Peter, Meatball Man. When she brought that up to Peter, she was like, dude, if you want to be heard, you can't yell, right? She didn't say it like that. She says, when you yell, no one will hear you, which is the more mature way to position it. But that very much subliminally was giving him the message of like, you can't talk to me like that because and it's true, your nervous system gets dysregulated. You can't hear. Selective hearing is a thing, especially when you're upset. So she's educating him and very much stating, you don't talk to me that way.
Right. And I thought that he
killed it.
He got that cue from her because she said that and he just sort of like, put his tail between his legs and moved on effectively.
Yeah.
But apparently we're not done with Peter because Peter, as my mom says, got the flower and
got the flower. I'm low-key wondering, and I have this here. I sometimes wonder if the producers make them keep, because she's getting, like I wrote in here, I'm like, you're getting rid of the bad boys too fast. Slow down. Like I wonder.
I said the same thing. I thought, I told my mom, I was like, I bet that was a production pull, I bet someone had a conversation with her that was like, you're probably done with Peter, but something tells us for ratings, we're going to need to keep him on. So I'm sure that there will be more red flag behavior from Peter that we will be unpacking here in future episodes.
Agreed. Yeah, I feel like that. And same with Jamie. I feel like, look, okay, question for you, Brianna. I want to know your opinion on this. Is there any way that you could see Jamie righting his wrong? Do you feel like there's any way he could win Michelle back? Or if you were in Michelle's shoes, he could potentially win you back?
And so I'm immediately thinking about the fact that he has to right his wrongs in two different spaces, which he does not believe at this time he does.
Agreed.
Because to him, he's like, fuck what the boys think. They can guess all they want on who started this. Like, I'll never own up to it. So to address them, he's going to have to come clean, but I don't think he's going to. And I think it's going to blow up in his face. But I think that if he wanted to, he could just let them know, like, hey, I did this. This is also why I didn't speak up. He could be really honest about why he miscommunicated, right? I think that it would also serve to share with Michelle, like, hey, when I came to you and I said other people were concerned about your relationship with Joe, I was actually concerned about your relationship with Joe. And I got nervous in that moment and I wasn't totally ready to own that, but I did want to hear what you thought. And so I didn't take responsibility for the fact that it was my fear. I don't know if that would, I don't know what message that would send to her, because I'm sure that some people would be like, all right, I'm all the way done with this, right? But I do think that as I feel in a lot of situations in which you have behaved in a way that maybe in the moment you weren't proud of, but definitely in hindsight you're not proud of, is to be forthcoming in the areas that you probably need to, and be vulnerable and be honest and take responsibility for not being perfect, and to shedding a little bit of light on what your intention was, and taking responsibility for the fact that the impact was bad.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like if there is any redemption for Jamie, it's righting his wrongs with the house and just saying, boys, I'm actually the one that brought that up. For those of you I chit-chatted with after that I didn't confess that to, I was embarrassed. It doesn't justify it, but, I messed up. can you guys forgive me? Can we repair our relationships? You know, if anyone wants to talk, I'm open to talking. And then with Michelle, same thing. You know, like when I brought that up, I actually wasn't completely honest. It was truly me that was really concerned, and out of my own embarrassment and nervousness for bringing this up, I kind of pointed the finger and shifted blame to feel more confident in bringing this up to you. And that's messed up. And it's not the way I like to carry myself. It's not who I strive to be. And like, can we get past that? Because if not, then I think at this point it's best for me to go home if the damage has been done, you know? Right. And that would be like, that really is the only road to redemption for him at this point. Whether or not he'll do it,
we'll see.
We'll see.
My mom asked after she saw all that, all of his behavior and all of the ways in which he continued to not own up the fact that he shared that false piece of information to Michelle. My mom goes, yeah, can she take a rose back? And I told her, I wish she could. I wish she could. She can't.
I know. I feel like I've seen that happen one time. I can't remember whose season it was, but I might be making that up. But I do feel like, well, who knows? I feel like I've seen it happen once. I do want to touch on a couple other things that that came up with Peter, and something he said that I feel was really important for us to point out with educating whoever's listening to this podcast on things to listen for and look for while dating, is his response when Michelle first confronted him about the whole yelling thing, which again, go Michelle for not waiting and immediately dealing with that. He said, and I quote, "That's not who I am." Instead of, "You're right, I'm sorry, I did that," right? When I feel like, and I don't know about you, and I don't feel like people necessarily say that's not me with malicious intent, or to necessarily not take ownership, but I do feel like it is a habit that needs to be discussed, because sure, that might not be who you want to be, but that is who you were in that moment. And positioning it from that place of like, you're right, my emotions got the best of me, and that's not who I strive to be. Like, language like that, to me, is more honest than trying to deflect and be like, you know, yeah, that's not me, you know? And I wanted to hear your 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I'm with you on it. I also think that if someone's really quick, their first instinct is to deflect and say, that's not me, you're not taking any responsibility at all for the fact that you were physically that person over there doing, because if it wasn't you, who was it?
5 minutes ago.
Who was that then? Because it wasn't your stunt double, and it wasn't your clone, and it wasn't your evil twin. So my guess is it was all of the atoms that make up you, Peter, meatball guy. So like for me, a big red flag in all of my relationships is when people are unable to take responsibility for their actions and their behaviors. It's okay if that takes some time, but especially if I'm dating, if you're really quick to say, no, that wasn't me, or this is why, or this is what happened, like, that's a little bit of noise, because I'm not hearing, I did that. This is a little bit why. This is maybe how I could have handled it differently. There's humanness in that, and there's honesty in that, but there's also accountability. Yeah.
Agreed. I think that that formula for ownership and apologizing and saying this is how I can do better next time is what we need to be really looking for when we're trying to qualify people into our lives.
Yes, totally.
For show. All right. Anything else stick out to you on this episode?
I got to bring up Salad Guy and his Mad Lib date. This was interesting. I
have notes on Salad Guy.
I'm going to be honest, and I'm really excited to hear your notes because I've been holding this. I've been keeping a lid on this since we got on here. I am not prepared to like him or trust him yet. That was a cute ass date idea. And it was a smooth operating move. And I didn't I didn't observe any like big major red flags in it outside of his physical touch. His body language was facilitating a lot of closeness.
Right.
But the Mad Lib,
similar to what we pointed out last week.
The Mad Lib thing was hella cute though. Ugh. What were your notes?
So my notes were cringe. Literally.
You didn't like the Mad.
I felt like it was rehearsed. I felt like it was too good. You know, like let me just start there with my experience with men who started off feeling like it was so right and too good to be true in the beginning. It usually ended up being that, you know? So I will say, because of my own past and my own wounds, I have a very heavy filter that men need to pass through before I'm like, okay, yeah, no, you're good people, you know? And women too, if I'm being honest, like, you know, it's not necessarily a gender thing, but the reality is, and how do I say this? I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I'm open-minded about Rick at the same time while collecting my own trail of evidence, you know, that I'm just kind of keeping, you know, and I think that's what healthy dating should be, right? Is you're along for the ride, you're committed to the ride, you're on it, and at the same time, you're open to witnessing certain patterns and behaviors and just making note of them, you know? And then again, figuring out what part of those behaviors are most consistent and ones that are outliers.
Right. Yeah,
that's
definitely.
really it. So my notes on him, like, with the whole letter situation and all of that, like, you know, Michelle saying you're smooth, to me is something that sheds light on the fact that it feels a little rehearsed. Like, it feels like, again, that too good to be true. In the past, when I've said those words to a guy, it's usually that. And at the same time, as far as Rick's behavior, again, open to seeing where it leads. I will say the one thing that I felt didn't sit right with me, and I learned this from Vanessa Van Hudgens, who's a woman who has the science of people. She like literally studies people. And she was once, I was listening to her talk about, you know, interrogations and criminals and things like that. And I tell that when someone's not being honest is they shake their head no when saying yes, essentially. And so it's a mismatch of words and natural behaviors. So something he was saying is, it felt so right, and Michelle is just such a wonderful woman, and he's shaking his head no while he's stating all of these positive things about her. And so is that like a conclusive end all be all, like, you're lying? No, but again, I just think he's someone to watch. I just think it is someone to keep an eye on moving forward to see how this progresses. You know, it's not glaring like Peter or Will. I forgot to go to the Will giveaway too. We can go back to that in a second. But, you know, but to me, that's even scarier is that it isn't so blatant yet. So let's just watch and see what happens.
I know.
I can absolutely acknowledge the cuteness of it.
You know what? It's okay if this is also like true to dating in general. Like, there are going to be things that tickle someone's fancy and make them feel a little like, oh, that made me feel special. And then there are going to be other people that see that and they're like, hold up, that did nothing for me. And I feel even less inclined to spend time with you or get to know you more. Right. And that's all okay.
Yeah.
I think that, as you mentioned at the top of this episode, like, the consistency in his behavior will be what we're going to look out for. And that's really interesting about his like body language versus his words happening at the same time. We're definitely going to be looking out for that. I still feel a really strong intensity in how he talks about her in his confessionals, because he is very eager. Eager is the word that I want to use. And it's eager in a way that feels like a red flag to me, because it feels a little bit obsessive. It's just sort of like, nothing will stop me from getting time with my woman. And it's like, I don't know what world you live in, but that is a little scary.
Yeah, like it hasn't happened yet. She's not your woman. She's very much dating a bunch of dudes at the same time right now. And in contrast, I will say like another, I feel bad pointing out Jamie's like green flags after the crazy that ended up happening in the episode. But I will say this in contrast to Jamie saying this is a good start, right? Like on his date, he said this is a good start. So that is the kind of language that a healthy person, again, not making the assumption that Jamie is 100% that, because as we just unpacked, he's not. But if we're going to analyze verbiage and what we should be looking for versus not when we're first dating someone, it's more along those lines. Right. It's not like what Rick did, and also Brandon, who was the guy in the pink shirt, who was saying things like memorize every part of you and dream about you, because he was like staring at her, the intense staring, right. And that made me a little anxious about him, because it's just like, bro, how much time have you really had with this woman to say something that intense, you know? So people to keep an eye out for, and note to self, ladies, when you're meeting someone, if they're really, really intense, really quick, really obsessive, really quick, that's something to be mindful of. You know?
I feel like love bombing is more of a buzzword than it was a couple months ago. But love bombing and sort of contains all of those behaviors that you just mentioned, like that strong intensity right off the bat. Like maybe this person's not necessarily telling you that they love you yet, but they are showing you lots of signs of them feeling very entitled to time together, and trying to facilitate that you're in a relationship that you have not really quite reached yet. And that's a really dangerous place for some people, because for some people that are like really seeking validation, or just like really goal oriented to like be in love and not quite yet aware of the things that they actually are looking for in love, it can be quite tempting to go with someone that is quote unquote being really clear about how they feel about you really straight on. And that's just something to have a second listen.
Yeah. Okay. So going back to the Peter and Will thing really quick, I will say this about Will. He made a comment to Peter that I thought was just as uncalled for as Peter's own actions and behaviors.
Okay, what was it?
And I'm trying to find it. Wait for it. We're scrolling. So here's the statement I found. He said, so Peter and Will are going at it. They're at each other's throats. And Will says to Peter, what else can you have to offer besides a slice, bro? And then it cut to commercial. Yeah. And to me, that is showing that Will is not innocent in this dynamic. And to me, that is devaluing of Peter. And again, when we analyze a statement like that, what is he really trying to say? He's trying to put Peter down to lift himself up. It's very contemptuous in nature. And if anyone follows me on the gram or TikTok, I talk about this all of the time. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, as determined by Gottman Institute, contemptuous behaviors is one of the leading predictors of breakups and divorces. And so if you'll treat friends like that, people you hardly know, we tend to treat those that we don't know with more respect, right? Than those that we have, than those that we are private with behind closed doors. So to me, that's just for both of them, Peter and Will. But analyzing the statement from Will, that's really scary.
Can you give another example of a contemptuous statement that you find comes up in relationship dynamics?
Yeah, like, saying something, the one I tend to go to a lot of the time, just because it's a really easy example to kind of wrap your mind around what contemptuous statements are, is, when are you ever going to learn how to tell time? I learned how to tell time when I was a kid. It's like, I'm better than you. You're not good at this, right? And so, whereas something like what Will said, you know, what do you have to offer besides a slice, bro?
It's patronizing.
It's saying it's positioning him less than he is, which is what contemptuous is. Let's just talk about that. To define it, it's when you're speaking down to a person as if you're more superior than them, whether that's smarter, stronger, better in whatever way. That's what a contemptuous statement is. And so in that moment, that's exactly what that was. And it's sneaky. And if you don't know how to pay attention to it, it's going to really, really, it hurts. Like, especially if you're in a relationship with someone who talks to you like that all of the time, you know, you're not good enough at this, or, you know, my ex used something that I think comes up a lot with unhealthy relationships is the comparison game, where it's like, well, my ex used to do that with me. It's like, oh no, that's nasty.
It wasn't healthy.
That's not cool, because and that's the thing, is like when you ever witness someone trying to put you down in order to place themselves above you, whether that's teasing you about education, pointing out a flaw of yours or something you don't do well, or even if you do something well and they're just saying that to pick a fight, red ass flag.
And you want to be aware of people or your partners, people that you're looking to make your partner. You want to be aware if they're doing that in their social settings, because I think something that we hear a lot from each other, which is, oh yeah, I don't like that behavior when they do it with their friends, but that they don't do it with me. That doesn't happen with me. Well, not yet. And really evaluate, do you want to choose to be with a person that is so comfortable being so patronizing with people in their life? That doesn't mean that you immediately have to call that a deal breaker and be like, I'm getting out of this because you're an asshole sometimes, but to at least bring up the fact that, hey, when you did this, it didn't make me feel great. It made me feel like you don't really care about these people, and that concerns me. You know, that's not how I imagined you that's not the version of you that I've gotten to know. So what's that about? Right. You know, being able to actually like address it, because you don't want to just wave that off and be like, oh, it's fine. This is just how they are in those spaces, but never with me.
Yeah, 100%. Because I like what you said, not yet. And also, like, we train people how to treat us. And so if you allow it to happen once, twice, 3 times, so on and so forth, it's only setting the precedent that you're willing to accept that kind of treatment and behavior. And so the second you spot it, which is why Michelle is she's killing it, because she is not allowing these behaviors to go unchecked, unaddressed. She's immediately sitting them down, having the conversations. And ladies, we must do the same. We have to do the same if we are looking for true, healthy, long-term, stable love. That's just the name of the game. Okay, more fun questions, because this was a really heavy episode. So there was a lot of heavy information in here. But who do you want to see more of? Pardeep's gone. We're going to mourn Pardeep for a second.
Justice for Pardeep.
He didn't get a flower.
He didn't get a flower.
Yeah, Pardeep for Bachelor.
Or at least like Bachelor in Paradise. I just like you said.
I could see that.
Like you said last week, like it's so clear in the editing who is and is not going to be featured on the show long term, because even if you find someone like Pardeep that is charming and adorable and you just like want to get to know more about, but you actually never see them, it's likely because they're not important to the long-term storylines. And I hate that you let me be aware of that, because I was like, oh, Pardeep's going, and I know it. So Pardeep's gone.
Yeah, it's so sad.
Yeah. What other fun stuff you got?
You'll be missed.
You will be missed. My line, Pardeep. I'm trying to get to know you. Hit my line. DM the Bri.
Okay, I want to see more of Chris G. He has good white boy vibes. I feel like he's such a dork, but from just like his intro package. But I want to see more of him, and I also would love to see more of the Harvard guy and Clayton. Those are the 3 three that we haven't seen much of yet.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to get to know them on Michelle's journey and see what they're about.
We've gotten a little bit of some vocal contribution from Romeo, but I want to get to know Romeo better. Actually, I at least want to see Romeo.
Oh, is that Harvard guy's name?
Did Romeo?
Harvard guy's Romeo?
Did Romeo go to Harvard?
I don't know. I know Harvard guy, but I don't know his name, and it might be Romeo.
It could be Romeo. Well, has your experience of Harvard guy, has he been vocal in some of these other like dramatics, like the stuff that went down with Jamie? Did your Harvard guy speak up about that in confessionals?
I can't remember. I just remember him being a great student on that group date in the front. And he was the one that was like, I was trying to calculate how many seconds are in the day when Michelle was like, how many times is it acceptable to call me beautiful?
That's Romeo. That's
that
Romeo.
Guy.
I want to see them together.
Yeah, that's Romeo.
I want to see them together more. We haven't gotten much of an opportunity to actually see them.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I actually wanted to talk about Brandon on the group date. He got the
let's talk
group
about
date
it.
rose. And he did this thing that triggered me from my own dating experiences.
I want to hear about it.
He was like obviously trying to be Mr. Smooth operator in the moment and like pulling in closer for the kiss, trying to make contact. And then Michelle sort of immediately like, I think she tried to neutralize the situation and she called him out on something. I don't exactly remember what it was. And he was like, sort of like a little ego bruised and was like, oh, you're trying to do this, you're trying to do that. And then just filling in time to get closer and closer and closer. And then like pulled in for contact. And that made me feel weird, I think, because it's really, I don't think that Michelle necessarily wanted to reject him in that moment. I think that I did because whatever he was doing felt kind of cringe to me. So, but it is uncomfortable when the person that you're in this like close space with is like bringing you in closer. It's sort of uncomfortable to be able to be like, back up, sir. But of course you have every right to say, no, thanks. We're not going to do this right now. And you should, if that's how you feel. I should, if that's how I feel. But it just sent me into a spiral.
Yeah, she very much called it. So that's like kind of going back to what I said about how he was saying all the right things. That was when he was like, she was like, you're staring at me like really intense. And he was like, yeah, I want to memorize your face and have a dream about it later. Like he was going down that, which I wanted to stick my finger in my mouth and relieve the nausea I was experiencing hearing that statement.
Not stick your finger in your mouth for a fun reason. I meant to vomit. To vomit.
Yeah. We should probably put a trigger warning at the beginning of this episode. So anyway, she called him out on it. She was like, whoa, like you're saying all the right, but like she basically said like, this feels rehearsed. This feels a little too much too fast. And he was like, you're right. I'm nervous. And so she pulled back and then went in for the kiss anyway. They ended up making out, whatever. So I feel like here's the deal. If you've ever watched the movie Hitch where Will Smith's character is like, you go 90, they go 10, I disagree. I get what he's trying to say, but you go 90, you go 10 is like after a couple dates when there's been a rapport built and that trust. Sure, this is not that circumstance. She's dating 30 people at the same time. She's maybe had an hour of time with each guy, if that, where she's been able to really dedicate, let's get to know you. I want to understand, where you come from, who you are, all the things. And so for him to try and put that move on her, I feel like with The Bachelor, it's really a rule. And I think with dating in general, it's a 50-50 rule. It's like, if you're trying to close the gap, close your own side of the gap first, and if it's not reciprocated, back the F off, because if you keep trying to push and you go that 90 when there hasn't been multiple dates, when there hasn't been, heart-to-heart convos and emotional intimacy beginning to develop, it's like really off-putting.
Also, tension is sexy. So let's say you like
100%.
Let's say you're flirting and you're getting closer, but neither of you kiss. Like, if you let that linger, that tension will build. and it can be really hot.
Agreed.
And if you step away, okay,
so hot.
Some people might find if you step away, okay, he killed the buzz, but that just builds more tension for the next time.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. And it's like, that's something to daydream about. You know, he's approaching her with this, like, I want to memorize your face so I can dream about it later, girl. Like, yeah. And it's like, okay, let's.
I love that.
That's my paraphrase.
I love that.
And she. See, pause for laughs. That's my theater thespian coming out. You know, she clearly was like not quite ready for it yet. But then after calling him out and him being like, you're right, I'm nervous, and like kind of laughing at himself, she was like, all right, well, now I can meet you halfway because you're not being a prick about it. Right. You know? So yeah, dude, it's, whereas, okay, my point in saying all that was if he had just let that sexual tension build, she would have been dreaming about him later, you know? Yeah. So and that is something, it is fun to fantasize about, like, what's our first kiss gonna feel like? Where's it gonna be? How's it gonna happen? Like, that is a really fun thing to enjoy while you're getting to know someone. And he did kind of rob her of that.
It's tough though, because on a show like The Bachelor, with so many people competing for the same partner, you don't really get the luxury of like waiting to build too much before facilitating the connection that can be brought on by physical contact and kissing, right? And I mentioned this to my dad last night because he was like, wow, she's really making out with a lot of guys. I was like, well, first of all, that's her prerogative. That's what we came here to watch. So that's all fine in my book. But also a lot of these, at least on this season, these guys are gunning for it. They're putting pedal to the metal because they want to establish a connection. So if you don't establish a connection, you will get voted off of the Bachelorette Island.
Right.
That doesn't.
And I think the flip side of that is.
I was just going to say that doesn't mean that you have to do it with like making out. But if you're feeling like there's no connection there, a quick route that a lot of people choose is to like make out. Doesn't mean it's always appropriate, but there it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also important to point out that if you kiss or try and make a move too early, it also can very much shoot you in the foot, you know, where it's like, I don't know about you, but for me, kissing is like a big box to check for sexual intimacy, you know, like I want to make sure that you have a good kissing style and all of that. I feel like a lot of women could probably agree with me on that.
I do.
And if it's made prematurely, it is a huge turnoff for me, you know, especially if you're not a great kisser, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's just like, it's an interesting this or that when it comes to which move, how do you want to play your move? How do you want to position yourself? For me, I would lead with but this is me, this is Alex, you know, but if I was in her position, I would lead with wanting to feel emotionally safe and connected to the person before I had my tongue down his throat.
Totally.
And that means using your conversation time wisely, which that to me is where a lot of people fail in this game of Bachelorette.
Definitely.
Kingdom.
Joe, on the other hand, I want my tongue in his throat.
Yeah, and you know, so far he seems to be super humble and super, like, you know, the fact that he found out about the death of his past coach, which was super emotional, and went on that date anyway, and then shared that again, you know, played basketball without being a huge ham about it. You know, he wasn't being egotistical. Even one of the guys said, you know, Joe's really killing it and he's not being a dick about it. Right. You know, it's like that to me, I gave Joe a couple brownie points there. You know, after last week, I was tentative about, like, you ghosted her. Now you're here. Are you here for the right reasons? Are you here for the clout? Right. And
doesn't seem that
the
way.
Fact that he wasn't being a ball hog or trying to be like, you know, I'm the best player on this team, so you all need to get me the ball. Right. You know, that was huge for me to see with him.
They're having a love and basketball moment, and I am very here for it. I think they're really, really cute. And it's clearly their connection is big and it's threatening. And that's why we got a lot of the events that took place after that with Jamie, but it's because they have a good thing and it's very clear to other people. Getting in some people's heads.
True. All right, friends. So if you liked this episode, make sure to leave a review or share it. Follow us on the gram and TikTok at Ditch the Script Pod. And again, if you have any questions about your love life, dating, relationships, all the things, head to our website at ditchthescriptpod.com and submit it to us. We'd be happy to answer it for you.
Let us know what's going on.
That's it.
We want to know. So far, it's a one-sided relationship, and I would love to know. Okay. Sayonara.
Or hear more of. Bye.